coming up as well in 15 minutes or so. And let's look back at the weekend. What was it? 17 minutes past 7 o'clock. We look back, but we look forward, because for the first time in 18 months now, people in Wales do not legally have to socially distance. Face masks aren't mandatory in pubs as we've moved into COVID alert level 0. Most COVID restrictions have ended. Face masks still need to be worn in public places like on buses, in shops and in hospitals. And hospitality venues must carry out a COVID risk assessment now in order to assess and consider reasonable measures to keep customers safe. So how will that affect you if you are planning a major event over many different venues? Peter Phillips runs the Porthcawl Elvis Festival. Hi there, Peter.
Morning, Oliver.
Hi
how
there.
are you?
Yeah, very good, thanks. Before we get on to how this is going to affect you, what are the plans for the Elvis Festival at the moment?
Well, the plans are after Friday, hopefully to go ahead. We've been waiting like everybody in the event hospitality industry. I've been keeping my fingers crossed that the restrictions were going to be lifted on Friday, which they appeared to have been. But I spent 2 hours of my life that I'm not going to get back on Saturday morning going through a niftily titled document called Alert Level 0, Guidance for Employers, Businesses and Organisations. And my concern now is these COVID risk assessments. When you drill down into this document, to comply with the reasonable measures required for your COVID risk assessment, you have basically got to keep the restrictions in place.
Really? How do you come to that conclusion?
Okay, well, let me give you an example in this. It's not the easiest document to read, but what it does is describe for a business or a venue what it should do to comply with reasonable measures. For instance, it says here, if a venue, for example, having greater physical distancing when strenuous exercise is involved, strenuous exercise could be dancing. So you're basically saying to a nightclub, you need to have physical distancing if people are dancing. If you go to page 11 of this document, it talks about pubs. It says in a pub that is rarely busy during the day, where are a few customers present, table service is unlikely to be required as the risk is lower. But table service may be a reasonable measure that should be taken on a busy evening or if a pub was holding an event, as the bar area could become crowded. What I tell you what I found terrible with this was there's a very sinister phrase in it called a hierarchy of controls, which is like almost Orwellian in its nature. That's my concern, is who's going to apply this document, who's going to assess the assessment. It's as if they've taken the restrictions off but put them on by the back door.
But if I sort of peel it all back and maybe look at it from the other end, as what the Welsh Government say is that as no two businesses are the same, asking individual businesses to carry out their own risk assessment ensures the measures are tailored in accordance to any risks identified. That's preferable, isn't it?
It is until it all depends on how it's going to be implemented. At best, it's a clumsily worded document that's too ambiguous. At worst, it's a charter for COVID assessment officers to basically put the restrictions back onto a venue or an event that appear to have been lifted.
I think you described it previously as a job's worth charter, Peter.
I did, yeah. Look, I might be being over cynical, and I hope I am on this. I hope there's not an army of COVID compliance officers regrouping with this document, ready to do battle. But here's my personal point on this. It puts the power basically in the hands of local authorities. So is there going to be consistency, would be my first question. And there's a precedent being set at the start of this pandemic that if businesses are compromised or individual livelihoods are taken away because of public health restrictions, financial compensation is put in place. My question here would be, if a venue or an event has to keep restrictions in place because of the COVID risk assessment or the assessment of the COVID risk assessment, who's going to provide that compensation? Because the Welsh Government, who I personally, this is just my personal view, I don't think they wanted to lift restrictions, but they haven't got the fiscal capacity to go down a route that's totally contrary to the UK. So if they are putting this in by the back door, and I hope they're not, I hope local authorities are going to be reasonable on this. But if you have an overzealous local authority, or these restrictions are kept in place across the board, who's going to put the financial compensation in place for these businesses or these individuals?
Okay, Peter. I feel like I should say, what Welsh Government might say to that is that you're, in terms of sort of second guess their thinking on this, you're putting two and two together and coming up with 5. But
I hope it's 4. I really do.
Peter, thank you very much. Peter Phillips, who runs the Porthcawl Elvis Festival. It's 22 minutes past 7.